But I've got Joe Owen with me from the Institute for Government. There seemed to be some confusion, Joe, over what was happening there. They weren't tellers to talk about the to count the votes on the amendment, the Stephen Kinnock amendment. They seem to bypass that, and they've gone on to the third reading of the bill. Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you seen anything like that before?
I haven't, no. So I don't know if that's because the further amendments weren't called, which is why they.
Which is probable. I mean, I do have a list of them here, but they don't seem to call any of those amendments. So we've been saying all night. I mean, it is proceeding through the chamber with extraordinary speed.
Well, and that is the reality of trying to pass all of the stages of a bill in the House of Commons in a day. Basically, you do have to rattle through. We've seen it's slightly more problematic in the Lords, where we could get to a bit of a crunch point, but we're expecting the vote now very soon, which, you know, based on what happened last night, you would expect to be successful in the way the amendments have gone. But the big test will now be the Lords, and then obviously what happens later this evening with the general election motion.
Yeah, we should just remind viewers who might be joining us that there has been a vote on the second reading of this bill, and in fact, the majority for the so-called Rebel Alliance, the opposition parties and the Conservative Rebels, was increased to 29. Caroline Spelman also voting for the bill. So there's no suggestion, is there, that the third reading is not going to go through?
No, I think it would be a big surprise if those 21 rebels last night, and then obviously Caroline Spelman, with all of the threats that they received and then having the whip withdrawn, suddenly had a change of heart. So I think we can expect this to pass through the Commons. As I say, the big test then becomes the Lords, but then also the big game that's going on in the background about a general election, and more specifically the timings of that general election, because that will become a key point that both parties will want to try and use the timings to influence their positions in an upcoming general election.
Yes, just to step back and explain for people the passage of a bill. Once you're past the third reading, of course, then it goes to the upper chamber, the House of Lords. But the Prime Minister's view would be this bill is well on its way to becoming law, so he is going to put forward his motion for a general election this evening.
Yeah, exactly. So he promised last night that if it passed the Commons, he would go for a general election, because it shows where the mood of the Commons is, right? You can't do anything about that. You may be able to try and pull some shenanigans in the Lords, filibustering, etc., but it's a clear expression in the Commons that he does not have the backing, and he cannot credibly go to Brussels and say, I can get no deal through, Parliament's not going to stop me, because the last couple of days have demonstrated otherwise. So we are then into general election territory. I should say it is really not a formality that just because it goes through the Commons now that the bill will pass successfully, because the Lords are doing their best to filibuster. There is something like over 80 amendments put down just on the motion that creates time in the House of Lords to discuss the bill. So we're not even anywhere near the bill yet.
But determination in the Lords on the Brexit side, equal determination on the Remain side in the Lords. I mean, we've seen Lords going in today with their sleeping bags and tins of food. They're going to see it out. And if needs be, they'll sit on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. So although there's a determined effort to try and talk it out, you would expect that it would go through.
Well, so you would expect it will go through, but it will be tight. I mean, the sitting on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, they would need to pass a motion for that, which itself could be filibustered.
Okay.
So it depends
So we could have another 100 amendments to a motion to extend business.
Exactly. It depends just how resolute the Lords looking to filibuster are, and whether they are kind of, having seen it go through the Commons and the Prime Minister shift to an election, think, okay, the game now is not stopping this legislation, but trying to influence when an election comes and when an election falls and how it is called exactly.
Of course, in number 10 today, they will be well aware that Labour is not going to vote for this motion on an election tonight. Under the terms of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, Boris Johnson needs 2/3 of the votes, and he's not going to get that, it would seem, at this stage, not until the bill has passed. So what are the options for the number 10 at the moment? What other things could they do to bring about the election they want?
So they could wait until the passage of the bill goes through. They achieve royal assent and try the 2/3 vote again. That's option one. Could still be difficult, because presumably Labour will want to push the date of an election over the 31st of October, so that the so-called do or die promise is already broken going into an election. So that's option one. Wait, use the Fixed Term Parliament Act. once the bill's got royal assent. The second option, which would certainly be unconventional and may send a difficult message, is to put a no confidence motion down, which just needs a simple majority.
A no confidence motion in himself.
To vote no confidence in himself,
Yes.
which would presumably, if Labour want to stop a general election, put them in the difficult position of having to then vote confidence in the government to keep them in. The other, probably more likely option, is to come up with a simple piece of legislation that could come in later this week or early next week that says, setting aside the Fixed Term Parliament Act, the piece of legislation that governs how elections are called, we want the next election to be on and then specify a date.
Okay.
And that would be then open to amendment and would have challenges in actually getting that through the Commons itself.
Yeah, I think we're all of the opinion that we are heading to a general election. It's just when they get it through and on what date it would be. Joe, for the moment, thank you very much.